This what if has been a year in the making. Every so often I scroll through the comments to see what you're all saying, ways we can improve, cool ideas for videos, and recommendations. On some occasions that are often not so rare, we notice someone asking for a second part to a very old video that we never got around to finishing. And though in most cases our plates are full with newer video ideas, on some occasions we say, what the heck, why not? And that's what happened here, my friends. A very old video series that I forgot we never finished. Well, time to tie this loose end up and give you the conclusion to What If Naruto Was Never Born. We will put the link to the original part in the description below. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check that you're subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. There had been so much silence. Years had passed, having come and gone in the flash of an eye. Despite now being able to identify the Mangekyo Sharingan of the man who had robbed everything from him, Minato had yet to discover anything new. In the times that had since gone by, Minato's leadership had returned Konoha to being what it always should have been. The Nine-Tails attack was but a fading memory. All the damage done had been healed. Well, healed externally. Some pains never did completely go away. This he knew for certain. His heart was shattered due to the death of Kushina and Naruto, and that pain never subsided. Every day he went home, laid in bed by himself, only to wake up to an empty house the next day. And despite Minato carrying a smile with him every day, he had some form of depression. He hated being alone. He hated not having the people he loved nearby. Every night was a reminder of what he had lost, and he had stopped celebrating many occasions, like his birthday, Naruto's birthday, Kushina's birthday, Valentine's Day. On those days, the only celebration he took was going to the pub and getting schnockered. Minato was not a drunk. He didn't have an alcohol problem, on most days. Only on the days where he was reminded how much he had lost did he go and develop a momentary alcohol issue. He poured himself into his work and on many occasions just elected to stay at the Hokage's office. He had long since sold off the house he once lived in with Kushina for an apartment. That way, on the days he did return home, he wouldn't be faced with the memories that were as ever-present and painful as the scarred skin in his arms. A lot had happened. He'd tried to keep himself up with the affairs of his friends, by celebrating firsts with his friends. That's actually where he was now. He was currently sitting in the home of Fugaku Uchiha, knocking back some tea, digging into the most fun finger foods they could. Today was a day to celebrate. The Chunin exams had come and gone, and Sasuke now was promoted to Chunin. Minato laughed, congratulating Sasuke and the others in the family. Fugaku often invited Minato over. To be honest, he was glad that the Hokage took such an interest in his family life and the family lives of others. But he knew that the reason why Minato did so was because he had no family of his own to be interested in. There was always a bittersweet tinge in the air when Minato came around. But one thing Fugaku knew was certain. Minato and he had grown closer than they ever had been, and due to Minato's kind and caring nature, the relationship with the Uchiha had never been stronger. Fugaku had become quite the confidant for Minato, and since Hiruzen had grown older and was now looking to retire from his service in Konoha's favor, Fugaku had come to replace him as the sort of shadow Hokage, basically Minato's vice Hokage. Hiruzen also had lost everything that night, his own wife, but he still had a son and a grandson, and he had decided to focus on them even more now. It had been this way ever since Orochimaru had decided to go rogue and had to be killed. His experiments and the fact that Hiruzen didn't know about it was enough for guilt to take over and the elderly professor of ninjutsu to decide that maybe it was time for him to step away. He blamed himself, which was totally unfair. He neither controlled Orochimaru nor was in a position to know the things he had done to people. But all the same, some good came out of it. Hiruzen decided to preoccupy himself by taking his title of professor seriously and enrolling to become a teacher at the academy, where he taught chakra control theory, history, and political science to the youngsters to help them understand what it meant to be a shinobi. It was truly a wonderful blessing for the academy to have someone so wise and intelligent to teach the next generation. Minato and Fugaku had come to believe that this was going into the opening stages of Konoha's golden era, a new golden era, one that might even surpass the era of Hashirama Senju, a platinum era. The biggest thing that marred that from coming to pass was the Nine-Tails. It had yet to regenerate. The world was sitting on the edge of its seat. Half of the world believed that the Nine-Tails was no longer in play due to the death of Kushina, but because they couldn't be sure, they made no actions. Minato continued using misinformation to keep them guessing. To that end, he and the rest of Konoha's council had secretly selected the future Jinchuriki, painted the 8 trigram seal on them, and threw parades and parties for them, keeping them in the public eye as if they already had the Ninetales inside of them. They tried not to overdo it, but they were indeed doing it. And now it seemed as though things were balanced. They were sitting on a fulcrum. One wrong move and the whole thing came tumbling down. But on the bright side, so long as they didn't move around too much, the world would remain at peace. To help bolster peace, should news of the Ninetales ever get out, Minato sent aid and helped other villages in goodwill, in hopes that they would become allies. Now they were all just waiting for the Ninetales' regeneration. The moment it regenerated, they would go to seal it. But beyond that, there was a secret goal in this. Minato was hoping that the only person who knew that the Ninetales wasn't in the village was that masked man. He planned to be on the battlefield that day. He needed to find that masked man, and he wouldn't rest until he did. "So, what missions are you hoping to take on first, Sasuke?" Minato asked. Sasuke looked up. Minato chuckled a bit. "A lot of things are going to change now that you're a Chunin. You're finally ready to be let loose on the world. Missions you couldn't do before are now open. You can see the world, meet new people, and serve the village in ways you couldn't before. What is it that you're looking forward to doing the most?" Sasuke rolled his head back with a gasp and a smile, as if he was waiting for someone to ask that question. "I'm looking forward to finally doing some collab missions with other friendly villages. I met a lot of cool shinobi during the Chunin exams, and some of them were rather friendly despite everything. I feel like I could be friends with a few of them, and I'd like to try out missions where I could get paired with them. Perhaps missions where we eradicate bandit outposts or seek out rogue shinobi." Minato nodded his head. "Oh, that's quite interesting. Which villages are you hoping to team up with first?" Sasuke thought about it. "Well, I met with a lot of cool people from the Hidden Grass village. Me and Sakura really hit it off with this girl named Karine when we were in the Forest of Death. She got separated from her team and was attacked by a bear. Sakura, me, and Konohamaru had to protect her and get her back to her team. I was fuming when I heard they left her behind. Kakashi said people who do that are trash, but I was a little hasty to judge because, as it turned out, they didn't actually know they lost her and turned back to look for her, which I took to be a sign of honor. Since we both had Earth Scrolls, Kono insinuated we should work together to get Heaven Scrolls, and they agreed as thanks for the help. So I'd absolutely love to take any mission that sends me to the village hidden in the grass." Minato smiled and nodded as he listened. "I'll remember that for future reference." Minato looked to Fugaku. "Your son's very much like you." It wasn't much longer after that Itachi returned. "Forgive me for the lateness of my arrival. I had some business to take care of." "Oh? What did you have to do?" Fugaku asked. Itachi smiled awkwardly. "As you know, father, there are some missions I don't have clearance to reveal, even to you." "Of course. I'm just glad you're home and safe," Fugaku said. Minato smiled as well. But deep down, his chest was burning in pain, and it was everything he could do to keep from crying. He could only imagine where Naruto would be at this point in his life. Could Naruto have also been a Chunin? Perhaps on the same team as Sasuke? Maybe even close friends with Konohamaru? It took a while for Minato to realize his smile had lasted too long. Few people were looking at him anymore due to not wishing to make him feel awkward. A hand rested upon his shoulder. He looked over and saw Fugaku giving him a compassionate stare. "You know," he said, "the Uchiha have a strong connection to the Sharingan, and among the Sharingan's abilities is the Mangekyo. We call this evolution of the eye, the heavenly eye that sees the truth of all creation without obstruction. I awakened that eye in the past, and the secret is, the truth it sees isn't something so abstract as ancient wisdom that nobody knows, but a simple truth. Love is a wonderful thing, and it hurts so bad to lose. We Uchiha wear our hearts on our sleeves. From time immemorial, we fought for love and waged war for revenge after losing it. It took us many years of strife with the Senju to realize that we weren't the only ones who felt this way. One does not need the Sharingan to see the truth, Minato. The truth isn't revealed by the eye is revealed by the truth. You may not have the potential to awaken one, but you still see it. And the truth I'm going to tell you now, Minato, is that it's okay. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to feel pain. You are not alone." Fugaku displayed his Mangekyo Sharingan. The pain lingers and doesn't seem to go away. Some scars can never heal, but you should know that feeling pain doesn't make you weak. Feeling pain and deciding to continue living anyway is a sign of true strength. Minato began to tear up. Fugaku requested his sons step outside for a moment, which they both gladly did. But before going, each of the two boys stopped by their Hokage and put a hand of caring and understanding on his shoulder. This was their way of saying there was no shame. The Uchiha were contradictory creatures. If ever you fought them, they could be your worst enemies. The Senju knew this to be true, but if ever they became your friends, they would be willing to lay down their lives for you. The answer was simple. The Uchiha had big hearts, and sometimes they didn't know what to do with them. But if you sought someone who could sympathize with your suffering, there was no better a person to vent to than an Uchiha. You know, you and your clan really should consider ditching the military police for psychiatry. You understand how to help people in pain, Fugaku, and that's a gift. The Uchiha are healers of the heart. Fugaku stood, came around the table, knelt down, and gave him a hug. If people make an effort to understand us, then we in return make an effort to understand them. You are a friend of the Uchiha, Minato, and because of that, we will always be your staunch and loyal allies. You are family. Minato sat there for a few moments more, just letting out everything in his heart. It was such a contradictory feeling. He was crying, his heart feeling a stirring pot of emotions. The joy of the color orange and the sorrow of the color blue mixed together on the palette of his heart, and they were mixing into a confusing brown color that took the only thing common about these two emotions to show off, which was tears. You'd think after this many years I'd have gotten over it. For as little as I actually knew Naruto, no more than 30 minutes, my life without him has totally changed. Because when you and Kushina conceived Naruto, a piece of your heart went into him, just as a piece of your heart was given to Kushina when you two married. And when they were taken, that piece of your heart was broken, and now it's left unwhole. It may heal, but those pieces will remain missing until the day you see them again. And it's okay to recognize that, but just don't let it destroy you, because you will see them again one day. Just be patient. Minato nodded in understanding. As the night continued, Minato returned to his happy self, and as he left Fugaku's household, he was in higher spirits than when he had came. Returning to his own apartment, he entered, closing the door behind him and locking it. He grabbed a kunai from his pocket. He could already tell something was wrong. He smelled something strange, like smoke. He entered the main living area and finally returned his kunai to its holster. You know, you really should turn on the lights when you enter a house, or do you like scaring me, he asked. Taking a puff from his pipe, Jiraiya looked over with a smile. I like the drama of being an undercover spy. We can only ever meet in the dark, or I'll never be able to write about these escapades in my memoirs. Minato stepped to the stove and put on a pot of water. While he had just had his fill of tea, he knew Jiraiya might like some, so he began the process of boiling the water. So, what brings you here, Jiraiya-sensei? Well, Lord Fourth, he said in an attempt to show Minato how cringe the title usage was, especially when they were more friend here than anything else. I came to talk to you about my investigations. You know how you've sent me to look for the man in the mask with the Sharingan? Yeah, do you have a lead? Jiraiya nodded. It's not much, but it's promised to make my job a little easier. You see, there's a mercenary group that's been making the rounds, filled with rogue shinobi. While investigating the masked man, I asked around, and someone who had seen this group said that they saw a man in a wooden mask as a part of their group. It wasn't much of a lead, especially when the person I talked to didn't recognize the mask that was used. However, the moment they saw the sketch of the Mangekyo Sharingan, their eyes lit up with fear, and I knew whoever this Akatsuki member was, they must have also been in the group I was tracking. Minato understood. He kept thinking about it until the teapot began to squeal. He took it off the burner and began to pour 2 cups of boiling water before placing a bag in each. He brought it to Jiraiya, who, blowing the steam off the substance, began to drink. So you're adamant that the one who set the Nine Tails free is a part of this mercenary group, this Akatsuki? Jiraiya nodded. I am. Minato nodded in return. That's interesting. Perhaps we should divert some more manpower into investigating these Akatsuki members. If we can learn more about them, we can probably find out where this masked man is. And what have these Akatsuki been up to? That's the thing, Jiraiya said. They've been asking about tailed beasts. Minato's gaze sharpened. We definitely need to keep tabs on them. And so their conversation for the night came to an end. Jiraiya and Minato would go out on the town together, stopping by the entertainment district where they entered the biggest casino in all of Konoha. Cashing some money, they played a few games. Jiraiya, of course, had the crappiest luck, turning up snake eyes every roll, it seemed. Minato's luck had improved though, and it seemed that this lead was the beginning of it. For a while after, they began to slowly feed false information to this Akatsuki, because Minato had a bit of a plan. It was very risky, but if it worked out, it would not only secure Konoha power, but would eliminate one of their greater threats. Minato was playing the long game here, and so, as he and Jiraiya met at the Hokage's office, at about an hour before noon, they discussed what they had planned and what they were doing. It was around this time that suddenly a shinobi ran into the Hokage's office. Lord Fourth, big news came in you're gonna want to hear. The Nine Tails just regenerated, in the forest, south of the Valley of the End. Minato heard this and stood. Jiraiya looked back at the shinobi and then back to Minato. Minato quickly picked up the phone and called a number. There was an automated voice, but he didn't wait for it to finish talking. He began typing numbers into the phone. The numbers were a special code designed to signify that the Ninetales was regenerated and that the mission they had planned was finally a go. He hung up the phone and moved to grab his shinobi gear. Jiraiya was close behind him. "Are you coming with us?" Minato asked. Jiraiya nodded. "I can't just leave my student to fend for himself against the Ninetales alone." All around the village, pagers began to go off. Many shinobi who heard them went down to check. Their faces grew pale, and they dropped everything they were doing to either get to the Hokage's office or back to their home to change. The people of Konoha knew something was up, but what it was, they had no clue. When they all gathered together, Minato told them they were to move out for the place the Ninetales was seen. So they all rushed off as fast as they could. Their Jinchuriki was with them, nervous as could be, but he told them it would be okay and that they could handle it. Minato and the others jumped through the treetops, reaching the location where the beast had been found. Following its tracks, they found it by the river that passed down from the Valley of the End, taking up its share of the water. This was likely due to the nerves of having realized it had just perished and was finally back. It was likely unsure as to the length of time it had been gone, and that was for the best. Minato looked to Jiraiya. "Do you think they know?" he asked. Jiraiya nodded. "I managed to get a pager into their possession with information on how to use it. There's no doubt that they know about the Ninetales." Minato nodded. He sent hand signals to tell everyone to get into position. Slowly, the group began to surround the figure of the massive fox, and it knew so too. Minato had watched it lapping up the river, and though its body hadn't changed positions, its tongue was no longer drinking. It was just standing there. Minato looked over at Jiraiya and sent the hand signal that told him, "It knows." He then proceeded to send a hand signal that told him to inform the rest of the team to begin their assault. A moment later, shinobi shot out of the forest in all directions at the Ninetales, some from the treetops, others from the ground below. Regardless, the Ninetales turned around and began swiping its claws at them. Minato told them to prioritize avoiding attacks for the time being until the plan completely finalized. Minato was the only shinobi daring to draw himself into its vicinity. Placing his hands upon it, he placed a marker on it that would allow him to teleport to it in the event that he needed to teleport away at some point in time. It was then that over the radio, he got a message saying that suspicious and unidentified shinobi had entered the vicinity. Good, let them through. He then told the others to make it look convincing before telling them to further defend their lives, because in the end, what mattered most was protecting them. After a few more moments had passed, the Akatsuki pulled itself into the fray, sending their forces in to hobble both Konoha forces as well as to bring down the Ninetales. Instrumental in this process was Kisame. Due to his overwhelming strength, he was a beast on the battlefield to rival even the Ninetales. Sasori, with his puppets, was enough to offset the difference in numbers between their two forces. Hidan was a different threat entirely. He was sent in to focus on the Ninetales. Drawing a little blood, he began to use it to cast his cursed technique on Kurama, allowing him to massively wound it and bring it down to the point where it could not handle the harm being done to its body, all while Hidan seemed to shrug it off. Tobi was nearby, his orange mask waiting and watching in anticipation. Minato and Jiraiya demanded that the forces of Konoha attack. Might Guy, who had been selected to help specifically for this battle, went after Kisame in an attempt to stop him from harming their forces more than necessary. Guy, with his 7th gate opened, unleashed his full might against Kisame, which pushed him back. Kisame knew the 8 gates technique. He had heard the legend of the mysterious genin who had killed so many of their group with this technique, and realizing Might Guy's name, he knew that this man was one who descended from that warrior, bringing him back to being on his guard. As Hidan went about mutilating himself in an attempt to destroy Kurama's ability to fight back, he would be attacked by the sealing unit, who would use their abilities in an attempt to seal him away. Over the time they had spent gaining information on the Akatsuki, they had learned much about them, and a profile was present on nearly every known member. This helped them get the advantage on them, and after sufficient struggle, the sealing unit managed to seal Hidan away, all while Guy managed to defeat Kisame as well, though this led to Guy's body being left in bad condition. Guy would be pulled away from the fighting as it continued. Kakashi would enter battle against Kakazu, who also seemed to have a form of immortality, though it was not by any means as grand as Hidan's. With his Sharingan, Kakashi would be certain to discover how this technique worked and find its weakness. Jiraiya would go after Sasori, attacking from an angle as Sasori was busy using his red secret technique, Performance of 100 Puppets. Managing to get around these puppets, he could attack Sasori directly, which was the weakness of this technique. Sasori was hard-pressed to defend himself save for the poisoned cable that extended from his stomach. Jiraiya did have some issues with that, but so long as he kept close, everything would be okay. Minato, however, would see Deidara going in for a bombing run atop his clay dragon and decided to tackle him. Throwing a kunai into the dragon itself, he would teleport up where he'd proceed to strike at Deidara. He would tackle Deidara from the dragon, sending him plummeting to the ground. Deidara attempted to call his dragon back, but was unaware that Minato had already attached a paper bomb to its back. With that tag detonated, the whole dragon detonated with such explosive force that it knocked over many trees. Minato and Deidara rode that pressure wave into the tree limbs where Minato used Deidara's body to soften the fall. As they rolled, Deidara was freed from Minato's grasp as he went rolling too. Minato was still the first to get up. Deidara prepared more of his explosive clay, but Minato would use his flying Raijin to get close enough to Deidara to end his life before he could put it to use. Elsewhere, Jiraiya is facing Sasori. In his Sage mode, he produces toad oil, which he sprays on Sasori's wooden form. Sasori is at first confused, but instead thanks Jiraiya for greasing up his gears a little. That's when Jiraiya, using flame release, sets him on fire. Since the oil has already seeped into the deeper recesses of Sasori's flammable body, all the flames seem to burn both inside and out. Worst of all, Sasori can't put it out. All Jiraiya can do is watch as Sasori burns to nothing. With that finished, Jiraiya and Minato both turn their attention toward Kakashi, who's having a harder time facing Kakuzu. As they get closer, Kakashi explains to them that the masks are where he's keeping extra hearts, and that if they're destroyed, Kakuzu will perish. So Minato and Jiraiya go about helping Kakashi destroy each of the masks, until only one remains. They give Kakashi an opening, who uses his Chidori to skewer the final heart, bringing Kakuzu down. As this happens though, Tobi appears upon the body of the Ninetales and speaks. To single-handedly annihilate the Akatsuki is a feat to be sure, but I'd expect no less from the legendary yellow flash of the leaf. Minato's eyes begin to fill with rage as he looks at this man. This was the man responsible for everything that had happened. This was the man who had stolen everything from him. Minato, in his anger, lobbed his kunai up toward the man. The man sighed. So predictable. As the kunai passed through, Minato teleported to it and turned midair in an attempt to stab him. But before he could, the man teleported both himself and the Ninetales out with Kamui. Minato began to fall toward the ground. Throwing his kunai down, he teleported to it to negate the fall damage. As he stood there trying to catch his breath, trying to calm his heart, Jiraiya ran to him. "Minato, are you okay?" Minato looked back at Jiraiya with a smile. "Yes, I am. But for now, we need to get back to the village ASAP. Get all the men together. We're going to jump." Jiraiya did so. Those who were wounded, along with those who weren't, were brought back together. Minato would teleport them back to the village to the hospital. As soon as they got back, those who were wounded were taken in for treatment, and those who weren't would be given military ration pills to get their strength back. Now for part 2 of the plan. "Part 2, Kakashi asked. Minato nodded. "You see, it was a risky decision, but we allowed the Akatsuki to know where the Ninetales was in an effort to lure them out. They're currently a major threat not only to us, but to the entire world. So we baited them with something I knew they couldn't resist. As such, since I have a flying Raijin tag on the Ninetales, I can teleport to its general location whenever I desire. Considering that they can teleport with it too, they'll likely be taking it to their main base of operations. This is our chance to take them out and reclaim our tailed beast at the same time. That's why I need a strong party ready. Considering that we eradicated most of the known members today, if we strike them now with everything, we should be able to end the threat for good." Kakashi understood. "Now, everyone who's ready to go, come on." The group would grab onto him. Minato would then use the flying Raijin jutsu, teleporting them to where the Ninetales was located. This was a surprise to the Akatsuki, who had not yet known that Minato had even tagged it. They didn't even know if he could teleport to it if it was sealed away. But as they teleported in, they faced down the masked man, as well as Pain. Jiraiya was surprised to see him, realizing that he was one of the students he had once known. The masked man and Pain fled in different directions. Jiraiya apologized, but knew he had to face Pain and took a squad with him. Minato and Kakashi would chase after the masked man. As Minato and Kakashi came to a stop, the man turned around and looked at them. "I'll admit, that was clever, Yellow Flash. I never knew the full extent of that ninjutsu. Be honest with me, did you have this planned from the start?" Minato's smile was all he needed to tell the man that it was. The masked man clicked his tongue. "I suppose I underestimated you. Wouldn't be the first time, but it'll definitely be the last. Your flying Raijin will not get to me again," he said. Minato, pulling his kunai, spoke. "Only time will tell that." The masked man once more pulled out chains he was wearing around his wrist, taking into his own hand a kunai. It was just as it had been so many years ago, but as Minato looked at Kakashi and Kakashi looked back, Minato knew that things would turn out different. It was time to get justice for Kushina. Minato raced in alongside Kakashi to attack the masked man, but just as before, they passed right through. The man held out his arms, letting them pass, and once they had, he turned tangible again and pulled his arms forward, tightening the chains that proceeded to trip up Minato and Kakashi. You forgot a lot about how the last fight worked, didn't you? Kakashi stood and threw a kunai at the man only for him to catch it with Kamui and teleport it away. Minato and Kakashi were up again and ready to continue battling. Elsewhere, Pain had reached his 6 paths and already began to fight Jiraiya. Jiraiya couldn't understand how Yahiko could do this. How did he get a hold of Nagato's eyes? That being said, how could all of the other paths possess Rinnegan as well? Jiraiya's mind was set ablaze by the possibilities, and his heart was also set ablaze because none of those possibilities bode well for them. Jiraiya and his squad engaged the paths. Jiraiya focused on the Diva path as the others faced the remaining paths. Jiraiya was in his Sage mode. Fukasaku and Shima grafted to his shoulders, boosting his power and stamina. As his blade collided with Yahiko's black chakra rod, he spoke. "What happened to you, Yahiko? Why are you like this? You once had a dream to bring about peace." The normally emotionless brow of the Diva path furrowed. Once. Kicking Jiraiya back, he attempted to force Jiraiya toward him while he was off kilter. As Jiraiya was pulled forward by universal pull, he formed a Rasengan and forced it forward into the rod, shattering it and blowing both him and Pain away from each other. As Jiraiya stood, he noticed that some of the paths had been destroyed, but were being revived by the power of the Naraka path. It was then that Jiraiya understood. Yahiko isn't the one in control of the Akatsuki. He looked at Diva. You're not Yahiko, are you? None of these people are who they are they? We're only fighting one person right now, aren't we? Diva looked at Jiraiya. You always did catch on fast, Jiraiya-sensei, but sometimes not fast enough. Then answer me this, Nagato. Where's the real you? That's none of your concern, Diva said. You'll never reach me anyway. Looking around, he knew he had only one real shot to win this, and that required him to use the demonic illusion Toad Confrontation chant. He told Fukasaku and Shima to prepare the attack, and they began vocal warm-ups. Protect Fukasaku and Shima, he shouted. The other shinobi who weren't currently in combat pulled back to defend Jiraiya. Diva, knowing what Jiraiya was going for, rushed forward toward Jiraiya with his chakra rods, skewering 2 shinobi and casting them aside before using his almighty push to knock them all away. As shinobi flew past Jiraiya, Jiraiya gripped the ground tightly for stability. Any time now, guys, he said. Weaving hand signs, he released a flame at Diva. When the flame dissipated, Jiraiya knew that Diva was not hurt. Diva had used a wind release to cut the flame before him and now grew closer. Jiraiya would form a Rasengan and then spew flames onto it. As it spun, the orb turned black as an orange ring of fire formed around it. It appeared to be a miniature black hole in certain aspects. This was his perfected Rasengan. This was the closest he ever came to surpassing Minato. This was him attaching a nature transformation to his Rasengan, and though it was far from perfect, it was his piece de resistance. Diva formed a chakra rod in both hands. Jiraiya rushed forward toward Pain. Pain would rush forward too. Like 2 samurai entering a sudden duel, they went to clash. Diva knew he had the advantage, and as soon as his chakra rods pierced the Sannin, he knew that he had won. That was until the Sannin poofed away, being replaced by a log. Substitution? Diva questioned. He didn't even have to turn to see Jiraiya. One of the other 6 paths saw Jiraiya push the orb into his back, and with that, the Diva path exploded into a fiery swirl of chakra that ate him up. At about that time, Fukasaku and Shima finished their warm-up and began to sing, casting their genjutsu, causing all other paths to fall immobile. With the paths helpless, the shinobi quickly executed them. Jiraiya would proceed to use the chakra rod that Diva had used to sense the location of Nagato's true body. It was time to finish this. As much as it pained Jiraiya, he knew that all the deeds Nagato did were on his head. He made Nagato, and now he had to unmake him too. Minato went sliding across the ground as Kakashi was pushed back. The masked man rushed at Kakashi before he was ready, attempting to stab him, but before he could, one of Minato's kunai pinned the chain the man was dragging to the ground. Seeing his opportunity, Kakashi attempted to stab through the masked man, but before he could, the masked man turned intangible. He then teleported back a bit with Kamui. Kakashi began to think about this. From behind, Minato threw another kunai that passed through the back of the man's head without harm. Minato appeared there and grabbed the kunai from midair. The man tried to stab Minato out of the air, but instead his blade passed through Minato. He knew this was a ruse. At about that time, a Rasengan passed through the man's back, striking Minato, revealing that the Minato the masked man was targeting all along was just a clone, as expected. Minato, from behind, was shocked. The masked man stepped forward, turned tangible, turned around, and pulled the chain, putting Minato on the ground. Minato laid there for a moment as the masked man grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. "I told you it wouldn't work. You may not have learned from our previous engagement, but I certainly have. You won't get the better of me twice." As the masked man stood there, his ruby-red Mangekyo staring into his soul, he spoke. "Minato Namikaze, I'm certain you've been in pain these last 12 years. I've separated you from your family. Perhaps you shall be reunited. It's the least I can do. Consider it a gift to a master from their student." Minato's eyes widened as he started to piece it together. At about that time, Kakashi from behind had formed his Chidori and was rushing at the masked man. The man knew it too. He tossed Minato to the side and turned around, ready to phase through the hand, but instead of phasing through, his hand pierced his heart. The man stood there, confused. Kakashi explained, "You've been using Kamui to phase your body in and out of this dimension, but you forgot. I have Kamui too." Pulling his hand free, the man fell to the ground. Kakashi walked over to Minato to help him up, only for Minato to push past him. Crawling over to the body, he grabbed the mask and pulled it off, revealing the face of Obito Uchiha. Minato broke down into tears. "Obito!" Kakashi came over confused. "What? How is this possible?" Minato held Obito up. "Obito! Obito, can you hear me?" Obito opened his eyes. Minato looked down at the hole in his student's chest. He knew there was nothing he could do. "Obito, why would you do this?" Obito looked up at them. "You two. I did this because of you. I thought I was dead, but I survived. And when I went to be reunited with the love of my life, I found her unprotected, killed by the one I charged with protecting her." Kakashi looked down. "I didn't mean to, Obito, I swear." Obito scoffed. "Whether you meant to is irrelevant. I loved her, and you took her away from me." He looked up at Minato. "I suppose you understand the feeling now too, don't you, mentor?" Obito's eyes rolled back and his spirit left his body. Minato sat there and cried. Kakashi looked at Minato. "I'm sorry, sensei. I didn't know it was him." Minato tried to calm himself. "It's okay, Kakashi. Neither of us could have known." Eventually, Minato and Kakashi would meet up with Jiraiya and find him cradling the bodies of Konan and Nagato. Today, two masters found themselves at the end of a blade that ended the lives of their precious students. Where had they gone wrong? That was the question they were both tempted to ask, but in the end, they comforted themselves with answers that they would have comforted each other. The answer was, they hadn't gone wrong, their students had. The world had changed them as it seemed to try and change everyone. What they had to do was one of the most painful things they ever had to do, but now the world was safe, and the Ninetales was back in the hands of Konoha. Sitting down in his chair in his office, Minato looked out the window over the village. The sun was setting, and it was the end of another day. It was at about this time his door opened and Jiraiya walked in. "Oh, Jiraiya-sensei, what is it?" Minato asked, still unable to discard the honorifics he had held for so many years. "I just wanted to check up on you and see how you're doing," Jiraiya said. "I should be asking you that. You had to kill 3 of your students, or so I heard. I only had to kill 1. "I know," Jiraiya said, "but I still have you." "And I still have Kakashi," Minato said. "You've got a lot of people, Minato. I know you feel alone, but you're not. You have a family far bigger than you know. Look out that window." Minato turned around and looked out the window and saw the many people going about their daily lives, now secured because the battle they had fought. "Those people all, every single one of them, they're your family. That was the view of Hashirama Senju when he and Madara built this village together. To unite all clans and people into one, as a single, big family. I'm your family too. I just thought you should remember that." Minato thought about it. Jiraiya was right. He had lost many people over the past few years, but had gained so many more. "Thanks, Jiraiya-sensei." Jiraiya smiled. "No problem. Now how about we hit up that casino one more time? I gotta win everything I lost back." Minato chuckled and stood. Sounds like a plan. And that's curtains. I hope you liked this story. A lot changes when Minato survives. He's intelligent and strong and can be viewed as an almost fully realized Naruto. Writing what-ifs that involve them are always so interesting, but what do you think? Did you enjoy the video? If so, let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when more videos like this drop. And while you're waiting, check out these other great videos from our channel. Until next time, peace out.